Have you ever caught yourself whispering, "Okay, you've got this," before walking into a room? Or maybe you rehearse conversations in the shower, argue with someone who isn't there, narrate your grocery list out loud like you're hosting a cooking show. And then you pause. Wait, is this normal? You glance around to make sure no one noticed. Because somewhere along the way, we absorbed the idea that talking to yourself means something is wrong, that it's strange, awkward, slightly unhinged. But what if it isn't? What if that quiet commentary running in your head, or slipping past your lips, is actually one of the most intelligent, adaptive things your brain does? Before we label it weird, let's slow down, because the people who talk to themselves the most might actually be doing something remarkable. And chances are, you're one of them. Let's start with something simple. You lose your keys. Most people think, "Where did I put them?" But some people say it out loud. Okay. Think. You came in, you put your bag down, then you grabbed water. That's not madness. That's working memory in action. Research from cognitive psychology shows that speaking information out loud activates additional neural pathways. It reinforces attention. It sharpens focus. It literally helps the brain organize chaos. When children learn to tie their shoes, they talk themselves through it. Loop. Around. Pull. Adults do the same thing, just quieter. Self-talk is not a glitch in the system. It's the system thinking. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all self-talk is the same. There's the practical kind, and then there's the emotional kind. You know, the emotional kind. The pep talks before hard conversations. The post-argument replays at midnight. The imaginary speeches where you finally say everything you didn't say. Why do we do that? Because the brain hates unfinished emotional business. When something feels unresolved, your mind keeps trying to complete the file. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Our tendency to remember incomplete tasks more than finished ones. That's why that awkward moment from 2014 still shows up uninvited at 2 a.m. Talking to yourself is often the brain's attempt to close loops, to make sense of what didn't make sense, to say what wasn't said, and sometimes to say what needed to be heard, even if no one else was listening. Now here's a question. Have you noticed that the tone you use with yourself isn't always kind? Sometimes it's encouraging. "Come on, you can handle this." Other times, "Why did you say that? That was stupid. You always mess things up." The voice we use internally often mirrors early authority figures. Parents, teachers, coaches. Over time, their voices become ours. But here's the twist. Studies in self-distancing show that referring to yourself in the third person, saying, "You can do this, Sarah," instead of "I can do this," can actually reduce anxiety and improve emotional regulation. It creates psychological space. You become both the coach and the player. Strange, right? Talking to yourself might be one of the healthiest coping tools available, if the tone is supportive. And for people who constantly talk to themselves, there's often another layer. They process externally. Some brains think silently, others think audibly. For auditory processors, hearing the words helps clarify them. Saying something out loud forces structure. It slows down racing thoughts. It turns a blur into sentences. Ever notice how confusion feels foggy until you speak it? Then suddenly it's manageable. Self-talk can be grounding, especially for people who grew up needing to figure things out alone. If you didn't always have someone to guide you through decisions, you became your own narrator, your own advisor, your own sounding board. Independence sometimes sounds like conversation with no one else in the room, but there's also a creative dimension. Writers do it, athletes do it, entrepreneurs do it. Elite performers use deliberate self-talk to improve performance. Sports psychology research shows that instructional self-talk, "keep your elbows straight," enhances precision, while motivational self-talk, "stay focused," boosts endurance. It's not eccentric, it's strategic. Now let's talk about something softer: loneliness. Humans are wired for dialogue. Our brains evolved in conversation. Language developed socially. When connection is missing, sometimes we simulate it. Not because we aru, but because the brain practices connection the only way it can. There's something profoundly human about answering yourself. It means you're still engaging, still reflecting, still relating. Silence isn't always peace. Sometimes silence is isolation. Self-talk can be a bridge, but here's an important distinction. Healthy self-talk feels constructive. It moves you somewhere. Unhealthy rumination feels circular. You end up where you started, just more exhausted. The difference: intentionality. When you talk to yourself with curiosity, you explore. When you talk to yourself with judgment, you spiral. So what determines which direction it goes? Emotional regulation skills, self-awareness, past experiences. People who constantly talk to themselves often have high introspection. They think about thinking. They analyze reactions. They replay conversations not because they're obsessive, but because they're trying to understand. Understanding creates safety, and safety is something the nervous system never stops seeking. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Children talk to themselves more than adults, and research suggests it helps them develop executive function, planning, problem-solving, self-control. Adults who maintain some level of external self-talk often retain strong cognitive flexibility. They rehearse scenarios. They test outcomes verbally. They simulate the future, okay? If this meeting goes badly, I'll say this. If it goes well, I'll suggest that. That's not paranoia. That's mental simulation. Your brain is a rehearsal studio, and sometimes speaking the script out loud makes the performance smoother. But let's address the fear. Does talking to yourself mean something is wrong? In clinical psychology, context matters. If self-talk is distressing, intrusive, or feels out of control, that's different. But ordinary, voluntary that's not pathology. That's cognition. In fact, studies suggest that people who engage in structured self-reflection often have stronger problem-solving skills and emotional intelligence. They pause, they assess, they recalibrate. Talking to yourself can be recalibration in real time. It's the mind adjusting its compass. And maybe the most beautiful part, self-talk reveals relationship, not relationship with others, relationship with yourself. Are you harsh? Are you patient? Are you encouraging when you make a mistake? Who shows up internally, a critic or a myth? Because ultimately, the voice you hear most in life is your own. And for people who constantly talk to themselves, they are in continuous dialogue with their inner world. They don't avoid it, they engage it. They ask themselves questions. Most people are too distracted to ask, why did that bother me? What do I actually want? Am I tired? Or am I hurt? That level of self-connection can look odd from the outside, but from the inside, it's intimacy. Not everyone has that, and maybe that's the quiet power here. People who talk to themselves aren't losing their minds. They're actively meeting them. So the next time you catch yourself whispering encouragement in the mirror, or narrating your to-do list, like a documentary voiceover, pause before you judge it. Because maybe what you're hearing isn't instability, maybe it's resilience. A mind that refuses to drift aimlessly, a brain that organizes its own chaos, a person who learned to be both companion and guide. There is something deeply tender about being able to sit alone and still have dialogue. It means you're listening. It means you care enough to answer. And in a world where so many people avoid themselves at all costs, that quiet conversation might be one of the most courageous things you do. If this resonated, stay with this channel. We explore the inner world without labeling it broken. And if you'd like to support more deep dives like this, consider joining as a member. You might discover that the voice inside you was never the enemy. It was the ally.